Okay, let's get going. Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. One second, my name is Mike Martis, and today's webinar is going to be automating procurement on ServiceNow. I'm Mike Martis, the marketing lead at Stave, and joining me today is our lead technical consultant, Tom Creer. Tom, how are you today?
I am doing great, Mike. How are you?
I'm very well. Glad to hear it. We're excited to show you the procurement automation features enabled by ServiceNow, but first, we'll talk a bit about the ServiceNow platform, take a quick look at what the market is saying about automation opportunities in procurement, and then how Stave fits into it all. So, why do procurement on ServiceNow? So maximizing your investment in the platform instead of adding a standalone technology is a big key. As I'm sure you're all aware, ServiceNow is one of the most powerful platforms in the world. As you can see here, its growth has been tremendous. But what most people don't know is that ServiceNow actually started out as just a workflow automation platform. They started in IT because that's what their founder, Fred Luddy, had background in. But ServiceNow's overwhelming success can really be attributed to the platform's ability to solve the same types of challenges for multiple lines of business within a single organization. Specifically, its ability to consolidate multiple siloed systems onto one system of record, one single system of engagement. Its ability to automate outdated or manual, usually time-consuming and error-prone processes, so that you're being executed consistently and efficiently. And its ability to give management complete visibility into all work being performed within a designated area of business. And that's why adopting ServiceNow for procurement makes sense. It allows organizations to strategically leverage a technology they've already adopted and introduce those same types of benefits into their procurement lifecycle. From sourcing and procure to pay through contract management and supplier onboarding and offboarding. So let's take a look here at what the market has to say. What parts of procurement can be automated? According to data collected by consulting group McKinsey & Company, nearly half, or 47% of vendor management tasks can be automated. And the same is true for 56% of sourcing to contract activity. And the numbers go up from there. 89% of tasks related to placing and receiving orders can be partially or fully automated. And the same goes for a whopping 93% of payment processing tasks. As you're digesting those numbers, what we want to do is go ahead and run a poll. And right now, the poll question is, here comes coming at you. Does your company generate purchase orders manually? So it's multiple choice, yes, no, with some automation, or not sure. So I'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and answer that question. And while we're waiting, we can just sit in weird silence. Answers are coming in. And it looks like everyone who wants to answer has answered. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. All right. So let's see what the results were. Does your company generate purchase orders manually? So 36% said yes, and 36% said with some automation, but 18% said no, and 9% not sure. So this kind of echoes a little bit what we see in the field, Tom, which is that there are a lot of manual processes involved with this operation.
Yep, exactly.
So now let's talk about how what the Stave difference is and how Stave plays in this marketplace. At Stave, we're focused on extending and boosting the native workflow automation functionality of the ServiceNow platform to bring true digital transformation to procurement and asset management. Unlike traditional ServiceNow custom applications that need custom implementation, our certified developers built our apps for rapid deployment. As a result of that effort and our dedication to usability, configuration is also simple. Our apps are built to allow administrators to adjust configurations with just a few clicks instead of sinking hours of dev time into a single functionality change or need. And because our apps are certified and scoped by ServiceNow, managed updates and support comes with our apps. So now that the stage is set, I will turn it over to Tom, who will show us how to introduce automation into procurement process. One more thing before we get going, our Q&A is open. If you have questions along the way, feel free to type those in. Those will come to Tom and I, and we'll answer after the demo session. So without further ado, Tom, please take it away.
Great, thanks a lot, Mike. Appreciate that. Do have one more statistic before we get into the demonstration portion. According to the same source that Mike quoted, 65% of procurement leaders report little or no visibility into the supply chain. And that's where we're going to start today, is on visibility. One of the biggest benefits of automating your procurement process is the visibility you and your team can gain into your processes. Without automation, a lot of time is spent just trying to figure out what's on track, what's behind schedule, and what needs your attention. Each user should be presented with a dashboard, includes all the information they need, and an easy way to find the items they need to work on. So let's take a look at some dashboards within our Procurement Path product. This is an application that is available from Stave through the ServiceNow store. Procurement Path provides capability for different roles, different users, to be able to access the system and just see the information on their dashboard that they need to deal with. The first dashboard here is an end user dashboard. You can see a number of different widgets where I can see any requests I've put in, any purchase orders that have been generated on my behalf, any goods or services that need to be received into the system. And these widgets and information you see here are very configurable. We can set up dashboards with any of the information that that particular role needs. In addition, on the left, we have a set of menus that makes it really easy to just jump into any part of the application and get to the information, along with overall search capabilities and searches on individual document types. Some other dashboards include for contract analysts, for example, who might be dealing with incoming requests for new contracts, new procurement activities. Those can show up right on the dashboard. We can also include some reporting and some ability to just dive right into any portion of the application through these dashboard widgets. Contract manager may be more concerned with active contracts they're working on, any contracts that might be expiring, for example. And inbound onboarding vendors, so vendor requests that have come in, reviewing and approving those vendors as new vendors in the system. And then finally, a procurement manager dashboard might have more of the high-end metrics that you're looking for in terms of, year-to-date spend, overall request duration, how long does it take us to complete a request, total active contracts, and items like that. So having these configurable dashboards makes it easy to set up each of the roles that a customer might need with the information that that customer is looking for within their system. If we switch over now to planning, we'll take a look at some of the planning features in the product. Procurement solutions should include planning tools to determine what the purchasing budgets will cover and to track spending on an ongoing basis. This should include capital expense purchases as well as expensed items such as supplies and maintenance. Once you have the budget set up, tracking your spending can be automated and displayed in real time. So if we take a look back at our dashboard here, we can see we have an item here on budgets. And if we go in, we can see some budgets that have been set up just for me. And a budget basically is a pool of money that's allocated to a specific GL code or reference. It could be a department level, it could be a certain type of item. Each of these budget lines then can be set up so that you're identifying the items that will be included in that budget, a total dollar amount, and any GL code reference against that budget. Once those budgets are set, as purchase orders are generated in the system, they can be tied back to that budget. So now we can track out of our total budget for this particular budget line item, we can see $16,650 has been spent out of the $25,000 or so in the original budget. And it's very important that not only can you set up and look at those budgets, but that they're available so you can have them at a glance on your dashboard and can see exactly what's going on with any of the budgets that you have in the system. So in addition to budgeting, expense items and other purchasing that you're doing, it's also great to be able to plan for your capital expense and asset acquisition plans. And in this case, we can set up a plan ahead of time have all the information defined within that plan, and then be able to route that plan for approval to allow once it's approved, to be able to spend against that plan. So in this case, we have specific items that we're going to be purchasing as part of a desktop renewal project. And we can see that out of these items, we've already issued 2 purchase orders for the total cost. So when we go back to our overall budget for this acquisition order, we can see we've completed the spending on that particular budget. So giving you some tools around capital asset management as well as expensed items completes that whole planning process. Next up, we're going to talk about sourcing a little bit. And you know, one of the things that happens after your planning is making sure that you have some sourcing tools so you can determine what needs to be purchased, and also to follow a sourcing process to ensure you're finding the best vendors and prices. This should include tools for preparing contracts, researching costs, generating RFPs and RFQs, and accepting and evaluating vendor proposals. All of these steps should be automated, controlled, and documented to ensure compliance with your purchasing practices. So if we take a look at some of the purchasing tools, or sourcing tools within the system, one of the things on any good purchasing system is a request catalog, a service catalog. It may include hardware items, software items, things like furniture or facility items that need to be purchased, but also the ability to request processes from your procurement department. In this case, it could be that I want to invite a new vendor, or I need to request a non-disclosure agreement, something simple like that. Or it could be that I need to do a new procurement contract and I want to evaluate 3 or 4 vendors to see who's the best fit for that need. It starts with this request form. Again, very configurable, easy to add other fields to this. The end user could just fill this out, and when they're ready, they can submit this request into the system. And then it's made available to the contract analyst in this case to be able to review that request and take a look at it and make the adjustments that are needed for that to get it into the process. If we take a look at one of these contract requests, we can see there's a number of different elements that are available. First at the top, you can see we have a workflow defined for this. In this purchasing, which is it is a purchasing type of contract request, we initially went through an approval process, and then we did a planning process to gather all the information and include all the people that are needed to be part of this process. In this case, we're actually going out to solicit some bids, so we put together a bid listing, and then we generated some evaluation templates around that so that we can now take a look at all these different proposals from vendors and see which one is the best match. In each of these types of documents, if you have edit access, you can go in and make changes to the document itself. And one of the keys is the document type. So this contract request is for a standard purchasing contract, but it could be something like a non-disclosure agreement or a master agreement that would have a different workflow, a much simpler workflow probably than a full purchasing request. All the information then can be gathered. Contract analysts would identify who's going to be involved in this particular process, which documents are needed for it, and then start the process of getting that approved and working through all the different tasks. You can see there's different items on the screen: managing tasks, managing vendor responses, point of contact, and documents. But one of the things that we're doing as part of that workflow is generating tasks for different users. So in this case, we have a point of contact we need for the vendors to be able to respond to if they have questions on this sourcing process. Also, we had a planning conference, and that planning conference could be documented within one of the event documents within the contract request. In this case, we can identify who was invited to the conference or the meeting, what the agenda was, what findings were found as part of that, so that the entire process is documented completely. Some other things you might do as part of that workflow is to produce some documents. So we're going to need an RFP in this case, and a non-disclosure agreement that we're going to have ready to go. So in this case, we have a document management capability. We can identify all the metadata associated with the document, and then that document itself can either be attached right to the document record, Or we have the ability to link to a couple of different systems, whether it's Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive. And as soon as this comes up, we'll take a look. We can see that the document type has been identified. We have the version number, the document title. And in this case, we've actually linked it to a Microsoft OneDrive document in the system. And what that looks like, if we take a look at our non-disclosure, we can actually just bring that right up in OneDrive or in Google Drive and be able to display that document and start working on it. So this gives you a really nice way to collaborate on the documents that are going to be part of your sourcing process. So one of the other items that we're going to be doing as part of this is generating a bid listing. And a bid listing is the ability to put together all the information that you want from the vendors and then be able to publish that out on the web so that vendors can respond and provide their proposals. In this case, we've identified the types of proposals, the vendors we want this to go to, any additional information about scope of services, or other details that we need from that vendor. And when this gets published to the vendor portal, the vendor would be able to come in. This is what our vendor portal looks like, which we'll come back to a little later. But they can see all the open listings and then be able to go right into them and decide if they're going to be able to, need to respond to this with some proposals and other information that we need. So it gives the vendor a really easy way for them to respond to those different bid listings. So as part of this process is we're going to be getting these responses from the vendor. And if we take a look at a response, we can see that they've attached their proposals. So we've got these two attachments ready to go. They may have provided some pricing on any specific items we want to have them quote pricing on as well. And then once we're ready to go, we can generate evaluations. And these evaluations then can be assigned to different internal users to determine, to have them go in and take a look at the proposal and answer some questions about it. So for example, we have some true and false. Is there any hidden costs or anything missing from this? In addition, notes can be added to that as well. And there might be some where we have 1 through 5, 1 through 10 types of measurements that we're making. And again, being able to add those findings allows us to complete that. This is a really simple template for an evaluation, but this may include 10 or 20 different questions and evaluation criteria that you want to look at for this particular response. Once we have these evaluations done, we can summarize them for a particular vendor. We can get the true false. We can see any notes that were added for each of the types of proposals. And then once we have all of our vendor proposals in and we've evaluated them, we can put them side by side and get a summary of the total overall score on each of these different proposal types as well. So this gives us a really easy way to evaluate each of the vendors to decide which is the best for this particular sourcing event. At this point, then we could go ahead and award the contract to a particular vendor and start an award workflow that might include some notifications to the winning vendor and to any of the other vendors that participated, as well as to internal users to start the process of completing the actual contract and generating a contract. So it gives you a lot of tools, nice sourcing tools to get through that whole process. What we're going to do, take a look next is the contract lifecycle management aspect of the product. So once you have that sourcing determined which vendor to use and have generated a new contract, the contract should be stored in a secure, easy to access repository with all the obligation dates and tasks. Workflows can be included that help you make sure you don't miss any important dates, such as renewals or extensions, and help you manage payment obligations as well. So if we take a look at our contract capability within Procurement Path, we can see that we have, on our contract manager, I can take a look at my active contracts. I can see I have one that's for our copier maintenance, which is an ongoing annual contract with monthly payments made to the service company. And in this case, since it is a purchasing agreement, we can see we have a total overall budget. We can see actually how much we've spent so far, how many purchase orders have been issued, and how much invoices, how much the total invoices come out to. But we also have burn down charts. So we can see, hey, are we issuing the purchase orders too quickly? Or are we on the ideal path for spend on this particular contract? And these can vary depending on the type of contract, where you might have quarterly payments or other things you want to do. And then actual burn down around the invoice amounts. The contract document itself can include lots of different information, including financial information, monthly payment information, details around the vendor or the contract, renewal and extension information if you have automatic renewals, for example. And then that same document module can be used to manage the actual documents that were generated as part of this copier maintenance agreement, again, with those same tools available. At the bottom, you can see we've had a number of purchase orders issued linked to this contract and a number of invoices issued as well. So we can track all the spend associated with that contract and that vendor in this case. And then in addition, when it does come time where you see the expiration of the contract is coming up due, maybe within 60 days, 30 days, we have a number of workflows around renewal and extension of that contract, as well as adjustments. So if you need to do an addendum, maybe you're going to include 10 more copiers on this, and you need to do an addendum, you can adjust the contract with new amounts and new dates and be able to continue that process. So that's our contracting piece. Before we move on to purchasing, I think we have another poll question, Mike.
That's right. Let's jump in with a purchasing related poll question. I'll go ahead and launch it. How does your procurement team, how does your procurement team field purchase requests? Is it emails, intranet portal, so an internal system, or an integrated software, other, or not sure? And we will sit in the weird silence again. I'll give you guys about 10, 15 more seconds and we'll share the results. Okay, couple more seconds. Any last minute poll takers, jump in there. All right, it's ended. You missed your chance. So let's share the results here. And this follows in line with what we see, right? Lots of emails. We see this in the field. We see this as one of our main pain points. Lots of people doing a lot of important business communications via email, right, Tom?
Exactly. Yep. And so it can be very important to automate that process. ServiceNow itself includes some great service catalog tools to help end users select items they need from approved vendors. And once the items are selected and a purchase request is created, items can be purchased from your preferred vendors through purchase orders, or the items can be sourced from a stockroom if they've been pre-purchased. The resulting purchase orders may then need to be routed for approval and then sent to the vendor. Including your vendors in this process in the purchasing workflow to accept purchase orders and provide shipping information can further automate that purchasing process and can save you a lot of time. So let's take a look at some of the purchasing tools within the application. And the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and generate a new purchase request. So if we go back to our request catalog here, and let's just say we're going to do computer hardware, and I'm going to go ahead and purchase an iPad. We have the shopping experience. Again, this is part of the ServiceNow experience that's brought out to the service portal. Gives you the ability to see all the detail of what you're going to be ordering. You can add those items to your cart. At any point, you can view the cart and see what you have pending there. And I can see I have my iPad here. I've got my total cost. I can include any delivery instructions or special instructions. Maybe I need some applications loaded on this iPad before it's sent to me. I can include that. And then when I'm ready to go, I can go ahead and check out, which creates a new purchase request and optionally routes it for approval. So that purchase request is now available for a buyer or sourcing agent to be able to take a look at and then process that into resulting purchase orders. So if I go and look at my open requests, I can see these are all items that still need to be sourced. And I have one here that just came in. I can see all the detail around it, who requested it, whether it needs approval or not. And you can see in this case, it actually got approved automatically. So we have a workflow set up here. And this workflow engine is part of ServiceNow. We use it for the contract requests, purchase orders, contracts themselves. In this case, we looked at the price and said, if it's under $1,000, we can actually automatically approve this. And that's just the rule that we have set up in our demo system, but these can be very easy to configure to include an approval group in here if needed, or you may have tasks generated as associated with this purchase request as well. So lots of capability around that particular process. Since we have this already approved, I can go ahead and source this request. And if I take a look, I can see that I have one item I need. I have 4 in stock, so I could easily do a transfer order, move that from a stock room and ship it right to the end user who needs it, or to the next step in the process, maybe a staging area. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and add another purchase order though. If I have more than one vendor, I can choose between the different vendors that are associated. I can also add additional quantity if I know that I'm getting low in my stock room on that. And then I can pick the area, the location where I need to send this particular item. So I can go ahead and submit that. We can see the process flows move to deliver items as far as the request is concerned. So the end user will see that and always be in the know about what's going on with any of the requests they've submitted. But in addition, that purchase order is generated and it may need to be approved before it's actually sent to the vendor. So we can take a look at all our requested POs in the system. And we can see we have one that was requested here today. And again, we can go ahead and edit this and add any information we need to. This could have been automatically assigned to the correct purchasing agent, depending on who's responsible for this. A description can be added, shipping information, any terms and conditions. All of that information can be added to the purchase order. When it's ready to go, we can click order. That will generate an email directly to the vendor with potentially a PDF that's attached to it with the purchase order, so that the vendor now has all the information they need to be able to process that particular order. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is the receiving capability. So if we take a look at this same purchase order, we actually have 2 things we can do. One is we can create the invoice directly, and this is something the vendor can also do. So once we know we've shipped the item, we can create the invoice. We can come down and see, related to this purchase order is a single invoice we just created. And we can see all the detail around that particular invoice, including all the line items that are associated with it. So we have the line item for this Apple iPad Pro, and all the detail on the costs and information around that. And then when we're ready to go, we can go ahead and submit that for approval and have it go through the workflow with review and approval of that particular invoice. If we come back to our purchase order, the other thing that will happen is once that item is received, on your shipping dock, you're going to have somebody, an inventory manager or an end user, if it goes directly to the end user, be able to come in and receive that item. And what that does is it allows us to move into the invoicing process. So managing invoices on ServiceNow, it can be really easy and automated as well. Once the item's been shipped and the services have been completed, vendors can generate the invoices and submit them for review and approval. But by providing the approval with the purchase order information, including detailed line item information, and the fact that it's been received, and then matching that to the new invoice, the invoice approval can be automated as well. The invoices, once they're approved, can then be integrated and sent to a payment processing system so that the vendor can be paid, scheduled and paid. So there's areas where there can be integration with various AP, ERP systems and payment systems. So once we've generated that invoice, received the item, that invoice can be completed. So Mike, I think this is a point where we have another polling questions. I think our last one.
Yeah, so this one's about vendor communications. I don't want to overwhelm you guys with a bunch of polls, but this is the last one. How does your procurement team communicate with vendors? The options here: mostly email, mostly phone, secure vendor portal, other, or not sure. And we'll give about 35 seconds or so to grab some answers here. Don't be shy. So looks like we still have some poll results sprinkling in. Sprinkling in? That's not right. Trickling in, that's what I meant. Okay, let's end the poll. So the results, how does your procurement team communicate with vendors? Again, just like we, there we go. Just like we see in the field, 71% say mostly email, right? So very few people have a vendor portal. And that's one of our main features that we like to talk about because of how it addresses the pain point of those pesky email chains.
Exactly. So integrating your vendors into your procurement process can be a real time saver. Whether the vendors are using a portal to update purchase orders and create invoices, or they are electronically integrated, the more you can get your vendors to do, the less you need to follow up and keep things in sync. In addition, vendor onboarding and offboarding using a vendor portal can greatly simplify those processes and ensure compliance with your vendor standards. So let's take a look at vendor management a little bit here. So a couple of things that come to mind is that vendor onboarding process, and being able to automate that can really save a lot of time. One of the things that you can do is invite a new vendor directly into the system. Again, this is an intake form. It allows a requester to be able to fill out the form with all the information needed for that vendor, and then submit that request. And we can do some automation here to look for any vendors that already exist in the system. So not creating a vendor that's already existing is pretty important, by matching them by the name of the vendor, and also the email domain name can give us a clue that that vendor already exists. Once that vendor is ready to go and get invited into the system, we can send an email to the vendor with a link URL into the system, a username and a password for them to go ahead and log into the system and update their own profile. Once they've updated that profile, they can submit those updates into the system for our contract manager to take a look at. And that contract manager can see all these new requests that have come in from vendors. In this case, for example, we have a new onboarding request. And again, there's a workflow around onboarding that vendor with all the information here. There's different types of requests. As important as onboarding it is, offboarding can also be very important. So when we decide we need to offboard a vendor, there could be a workflow with tasks for IT, legal, maybe the business unit needs to be involved in notifying the vendor that the contract is completed, or whatever it might be that precipitated that offboard. So we have all the information about the vendor. During that onboarding request, the vendor can fill in a lot of this information for you. So whether there are vendor diversity things that you want to be able to track around that vendor, any contact information, addresses, etc. And then we can track dates like audit dates. If you're doing audits against your vendor, you want to be able to track that information. Insurance, so any general liability or other kinds of insurance, even auto insurance, can be tracked through the system. And then things like the business classifications, certificate numbers for various different types. Since this one is a veteran business, we need to get that certificate number about the veteran-owned business. And then information on quality assurance, what kind of quality surveys have they done? Lots of information that can be tracked for each of your vendors. And then this information can be used on an ongoing basis. So once they're approved, you now have dates where you can be reminded to set up a meeting with the vendor, go over all the information, any issues that vendor's been having, and then look at planning for the next year with that particular vendor. So financial information as well. So that onboarding request, once they're approved, that vendor record gets created as an approved vendor, and now they're available to receive purchase orders and contracts. And if we took a look again at our vendor portal, you can see that the vendor can easily come in and just see any of their open purchase orders. They can see what status they're in, and then if needed, take action to acknowledge that purchase order, and then provide shipping information, or maybe they completed the services, they need to indicate that to you. They can also issue or create invoices and then track their invoices to see if they've been approved, if they've been submitted to AP, and if they've been paid. all of that information makes it easy for them to find that without having to contact you. We mentioned the open bid listings that they can bid on at any time. And then in addition, they have a certificate management system so they can see which certificates they've already issued and what the status is of those, and then be able to update those too. They'll get notified when that expiration date comes around and then be able to submit a new certificate. Other things like their own users, they can manage directory of users within their company. And then we have a vendor messaging capability to be able to message back and forth with the vendors directly as well. So that's the vendor portal, and pretty much concludes the demonstration portion, of the presentation today. Mike, let's see if we have any Q&A questions that have come up.
Sure, I have a few. So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. We are going to go over some Q&As right now. That was the end of the demo session. You can see the information on the screen. If you have questions you want to send via email or contact us on our website or even give us a phone call. So first question that came in was from Bill. He asked, can you describe the security that prevents unauthorized access to electronically submitted bid proposals?
Sure. So by using that vendor portal, what we've done is created a role for that vendor that's based on the company name that that vendor is associated with, that user's associated with. And by doing that, we can limit which documents they have access to. So if they are putting in a proposal, they're going to be tagged, that proposal will be tagged with that company name, and that'll ensure that only authorized users, either internal users who are evaluating the proposal or the vendor that submitted it, would be able to access that. And that's using the capabilities within ServiceNow to ensure that privacy of those proposals. Even within the company, there are some procurement policies that say we need to evaluate each of these proposals blindly and not know which vendor is associated with it. And again, using the roles and security in ServiceNow, that can be set up as well.
Great. And actually, Bill had a follow-up question. Can you please describe how the system allows for public bid openings?
Sure. So when you saw the bid listing that was created, in fact, I'll pop over there real quick to show you that. One of the features of that is that you can go ahead and say that I want that to be a public bid listing instead of specifying the individual vendors that are going to be providing that information. By doing that, we actually look at the category of this purchase. So you can have vendor categories set up. And if I go ahead and remove these three vendors, I can indicate this is a public bid listing. That will show up on anybody who's in the right category for this particular event, and then they can go ahead and submit their bid listing. This also, once this is published, we can send emails out to any of the vendors that meet that category or that are listed specifically for this bid listing, so that they know that that new opportunity is available for them to submit proposals to.
Great. So let's move on. Next question was from Andreas, who asked, is there a possibility to use existing procurement networks? I guess integration is what he's asking about. If you're already on a procurement network or a tool.
Exactly.
Integration.
Yes. So one of the things I didn't mention is the ability to use punch outs, for example, and also to integrate with vendors. So there's several areas where integration can take place. One is at that upfront purchase request and the ability to punch out to a vendor site to be able to do your shopping. Once that cart is completed, a purchase request will come back into the system and then pick up on the workflow as we saw with approvals and then a purchase order created. And then once that purchase order is created, that can also flow right to the vendor electronically as well. So that whole punch out capability, we've done some integrations directly, and then there's some standards, CXML, for example, that will be included in an upcoming release. And then in addition to that, the ability to do RFPs and RFQs through a network, vendor network is also an integration point where when we generate that bid listing, that can be integrated to a public network that has a lot of vendors that can propose, provide proposals. That whole proposal process can happen on that platform. And then once we have a selected winning vendor, again, it can flow back in to award that contract and start the contract process. So a couple of places where integration opportunities exist.
Great. Okay. It looks like those are all of the questions. So I'm going to go ahead with that and wrap it up. If you have any last minute questions, did I get one here? Yeah. Let's see. Does the system allow you to automatically update your inventory of hardware assets in ServiceNow with new items as they're received, with serial numbers, PO associated, etc., from a purchase order placed?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So Stave is focused on tools around that whole sourcing process, from planning all the way through purchasing and then receipt of assets as well. And so during that receiving process, we can not only scan the asset tag and serial number of the device and purchase order number, so that that's all tracked within inventory within ServiceNow. And then we have some really nice tools in our Asset Path product around auditing that inventory, or auditing just a location for all the capital assets and even consumables that you might have in those inventory locations. So yeah, the follow-on to this procurement path is really a whole asset management capability, again, built on ServiceNow's tools that are there, but adding a lot more capability around that. And so that is something we can do, and probably we'll do a follow-up webinar on that whole capability.
Great. Any other questions here that we have? We can answer via email. We're right up against the clock here, so I'm going to go ahead and call it. And if you've submitted any questions that haven't been answered, we'll definitely follow up and answer you today via email. So with that, thanks again for coming, everyone. That concludes our webinar, and we really hope to see you for the next one. Thanks a lot.
All right, take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.